Do you want to lock your room as well so we don't have a heap of people join it? Or can they not see your URL?
They can't see the URL. They could probably guess it if they really, but I've never had it happen.
I've got my full screen shared if you want to lock it.
All right. Oh, I've got no one. Oh, right. You're right. So they can see on your side. I got it. Yeah, I got it. Hold on one second. Let me cancel that. Lock the room.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn the live stream off in the background so that's not. I might keep it running.
Hey, Chris. Hey, Nico. Mad Cow. Always first in. Hey, Glenn. I hope you guys are all looking forward to our little chat about Bitcoin versus gold. We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to tune in. Is it all working your end as well, Lark?
We're just getting it up and going here now. Be 1 minute.
Daniel says he's pumped for this. I think there's a lot of people that are very passionate about gold and silver and crypto as well.
That's it. Well, they're certainly not exclusionary, right? Sound money is sound money, and I think that's
unless you're talking you go.
We're live on my side, just so everyone out there on my side. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the chat. So we're going to be talking about Bitcoin and gold today.
And trying to be a bit more open-minded than Peter Schiff, maybe.
I have a lot of respect in a weird way for Peter because he's been able to basically totally trash nonstop Bitcoin, and he gets paid for trashing Bitcoin. He'll get invited to conferences for trashing Bitcoin. He gets invited on TV where he can then, promote his gold company, all for trashing Bitcoin. He's a good marketer.
It's a little bit like Rubini. He's just made a fortune now from being a basher.
Oh, it's crazy. Why do they keep inviting him to conferences?
And I think you could learn a lot from Peter Schiff about the banks and interest rates and all that stuff that he spoke about after he called the GFC, but literally doing the opposite of what he's been saying of buy gold and sell Bitcoin. If you had done the opposite of that for the last few years, it was probably the best trade ever. But maybe ultimately he'll be right.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the long-term perspective for a lot of these things is very interesting. Obviously, Bitcoin's so new, right? It's only 10 years and we're still very early in the price discovery phase. Let's be honest about that. Yeah. But the flip side is that it's still new technology, right? The path is not yet written for Bitcoin. We have where we want it to go, but will it go there is the question, or will something else come along that'll, blow that out of the water? Hard to say.
We'll get into that, I guess, tonight. So we've got nearly 100 watching on my end. I'm sure you've got more over there, Lark.
I got 66 tuned in on my side, which is good. Remember, hit the like button, everyone. Smash that thumbs up on both sides so that, the YouTube algorithms, they see this, they bump it up a bit farther and more people can come in and see. So welcome, everyone. I see all the comments coming in here. So we will be answering a few comments as well. So make sure to bring some fun questions. But we're going to be talking about gold. We're talking about Bitcoin and kind of just breaking down the idea of sound money for everyone and why they're both good, but why they're also different. And, bit of that. So
absolutely, yeah. I want to read people's questions about what they think about gold. Is it suppressed? Do you like silver better? Are you now more of a fan of Bitcoin and you've sold your metals? Or how does the audience think about it all? So we'll keep one eye on the chat. But do you want to maybe tell your story, like, because I was interested when you said that you were interested in gold a little while back.
Yeah, well, I started getting really interested in investing in stuff back in my late teens, actually, and I was reading books on economics and Warren Buffett books and all this kind of stuff, and I was really getting into gold, and I didn't have much money, so I didn't actually end up investing in any gold, but I was really interested in it and was figuring out different ways. Okay, how can I, try and enter the gold market and stuff, and I was young and I was lacking, I think, a lot in self-confidence back then, and I met some hotshot trader guy out in Wahiki, and he was like, gold, that's all done, it's about whatever else now, is so you should focus on that. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. Anyway, I got discouraged and started getting, early 20s, getting drunk all the time and stuff, and just kind of, lost it for a while. But I did a lot of research on gold and I liked gold. It was very interesting. This is obviously well before Bitcoin was around. We're talking 2001, 2002, 2003, like that far back, right? This was still 6, 7, 8 years before Bitcoin had even been invented. So,
Yeah.
it's very interesting for me, the history of gold, the sound money concept of gold.
Yeah, completely agree. And that's how I got into it, watching all those documentaries about the GFC after it happened. And, a lot of this was conspiracy theory at the time. And then gold really had its run after the central banks did that QE for the first time, printing money. And then I guess gold sort of lost its way the last few years as central banks have been promising that everything will go back to normal and interest rates will go back up and the economy will be great. And just in the last few months, gold's had another great run when people are realizing that, well, maybe we're going to have more of this in the future.
Well, it's really amazing when gold went up, like, what was it? It went up $50. But in order for that to happen, I mean, that was hundreds of billions, I think, even coming into the gold market, which was a very substantial amount of money. And we look at what some of the central banks have been doing. We know Russia's been buying. We know China's been buying, right? We know a couple other countries have been stacking gold like it's going out of style because the global economic system, the global political system right now, it's pushing these countries to sound money. And it's the money that they've always known, right? It's the money of their grandpas and their grandpas, grandpas, and their grandpas, and grandpas. Gold has got an amazing history in terms of its store value.
Yeah, so I think the round figures are, let's call it a $7 trillion market. And if gold's $1,400, for it to go up $100, that has to be $500 billion go into it, which is absolutely crazy. Imagine if that tried to go into Bitcoin in one day. But I guess I wanted to maybe ask you what your thoughts are now about it, or what do you think the biggest critiques are of gold, where it maybe doesn't have its place anymore?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few interesting things. Obviously, I think we could talk about some of the really far-flung theoretical stuff. We'll get to that in a little bit maybe. But for me, one of the things, I look at gold and I still think gold's good. But I look at gold and I think, well, I could invest my money in gold or I could invest my money in Bitcoin. And I look at the two and I think, well, gold is largely priced in. It's not going to have a 10x, a 20x. We're not going to see a $14,000 gold anytime soon. But Bitcoin, we're still in early price discovery phase with it, relatively early anyway. So even if I was very enthusiastic about gold and wanted to get gold, I would probably better off to wait 5 or 10 years, sell some Bitcoin for gold when Bitcoin starts reaching a more mature price level.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The potential upside, when you compare the two market caps, I think Bitcoin has more upside. The only thing that I guess I look at gold as being really favorable for is the amount of money that's out there these days in all the stock markets around the globe. And if it seeks some safe haven, it's not going to go into Bitcoin, particularly while there's no ETF yet or anything like that. It's going to go into gold. And I think the average number is, less than 1% of portfolios around the world have some gold in them. So if that number goes to 2%, maybe 5% in a financial crisis, maybe gold could do a 5x, and there's going to be a lot of big money parked there that can't park in Bitcoin yet.
Well, it's really interesting to see, like Ray Dalio coming out and saying, guys, you got to get out and get yourselves some gold because the political situation is getting such that find gold or something similar. And I was having a bit of fun with Ray the other day in my video, but he's right. We're looking at some pretty tough economic times potentially coming forward. And I know everyone's always screaming the sky's falling and stuff like that. When you look at the big picture of, that nearly half of the world's sovereign bonds are doing negative yields. As an example, we have unbelievable amount of debt, unbelievable amount of quantitative easing. I love what these words they call them. Quantitative easing. It's just inflation. You're stealing my money from my bank account. But all this stuff means that sound money is incredibly valuable in a time like this.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things I wanted to share tonight was the mistakes I've made or what I learned when I first got into gold and I bought some silver, and there was YouTubers out there and people trying to sell you a newsletter saying that everything was going to crash and this can't go on for more than a year or 2 years. And some of them are still saying the same thing 10 years later. So, yeah, I guess that does get you a lot of views if you sell that fear porn, as they call it. But I actually genuinely think now that we are heading into a time with a lot of uncertainty. So maybe they'll ultimately be proved right. But yeah, I guess the advice would be to listen to both sides of the argument, because when one person says silver's going to $600 and another person says, well, industrial use is declining, and you kind of got to make a balanced opinion in your head.
Well, this is the one thing I've always really loved about metals is that they have got this inherent value. Now, obviously, we look at them as a speculative asset, or to the extent that some people speculate on them, or we look at them as a store of value because they're rare metals, right? Or yes, people want them for jewelry and stuff like this. But the reality is, they can be used for jewelry. They can be used for microchips and different industrial purposes and things like that. And that has a real value, when it comes down to it. But when I look at the modern internet age, there is definitely a place for rare metals, right? I've got it in my phone and my computer and all that stuff, right? But if I'm thinking about the transfer of value or the easy portability of value and all these different things, now look, I'm not like a multimillionaire or something. I've got 500 kilos of gold I got to drag around with me or something like that. But a similar amount of Bitcoin is completely incomparable when you think about it, because that same amount of Bitcoin can be transferred anywhere in the world for $1 without paying in security and customs duties and all these different things, confiscatability.
Yeah, so I guess the message is the electronic nature of it makes it far more portable. And I guess the counter argument would be, well, what if there's some unknown bug that we find in all cryptocurrencies? What if there's a blackout with power? An EMP knocks out all the devices and all the ledgers around the world. So the chances of that all happening is very slim. But I guess that's something that the gold pugs put forward. It's a real physical thing that you can keep in a vault. So
absolutely. And look, the realness of it, the fact that you can take a piece of gold, hold it in your hand, I mean, that means a lot to a lot of people. And I totally get that, and I totally respect that. It makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, Bitcoin, it's out there somewhere, Bitcoining, right? You can't see it, you can't hold it. You have keys that allow you to access a tiny percentage of the ledger, but that's it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's really funny when you think about it. That's just this code that we assign value to, this rare computer code that we assign value to.
That probably leads into the next thing that I wanted to talk about with gold. And there's a question about how the gold ETF came out and it led to a 10-year bull market. So I'm not sure if it was necessarily the ETF that caused the market, or is the timing of everything happening. But these days there's the conspiracy theories about price suppression. Now, some of these banks have been fined for meddling with the price, so there is some truth to it. But in the world of these futures, the same as we now have Bitcoin futures that aren't backed by real Bitcoin, they're cash settled. And what we see in the gold and silver market, that these big traders are just dumping huge amounts of contracts at times like 3 a.m. in the morning to push the price down. It just doesn't really make sense. So there's definitely sort of some elements of truth to it. I'm not sure how much of a conspiracy theory it is, but that's what we don't want to happen with Bitcoin. We don't want to get all these, cash settled products and all that money try and chase exposure to Bitcoin, but it doesn't end up buying any actual Bitcoin and pushing up the price.
This is the great part about some of these great quote unquote part about these new futures contracts from back and LedgerX and stuff like this, that they're physically settled in Bitcoin. So that's good. That makes them, much less speculative, but it's still, you're going to have, this is the testing ground. They get the physically settled ones through, and then they start just throwing out more cash settled ones. And obviously the CME is cash settled, but it's problematic. If they can manipulate it, they will. And they've got teams of people dedicated with trying to manipulate stuff. And we look at what JP Morgan did, they got caught with silver rate riggings and stuff like this. So I've got an interesting question here I'd like to throw your way, Alex. It's from a guy, Ryan Renfrew. Do you think that gold could ever be confiscated again? This obviously in reference back to, was it Wilson? I can't remember.
This was a long time ago.
Back in the 30s in the US.
I've actually just recorded an interview with Paul from Ainsley Bullion, and I asked him this question. So his response was basically that it is actually still written in the law that they can confiscate it, but it was at a time when gold was money, when and the central banks literally needed gold to get more money for the war and other things. Whereas these days, if they need more money, they will do QE. So there's no real need for them. It would cost them more to round up people and their gold and store it than it would be worth. So he thinks that it's written in this old law that it's still possible, but I just don't know how that would ever happen.
It's these old laws. They're tricky because they haven't taken it away, right?
Yeah.
It's there as a safety, kind of an insurance policy for them, because if the economy were to collapse and dollars weren't worth very much, well, I mean, we could see precedent's been set recently with Julian Assange, where they pulled out the Espionage Act, which is something they hadn't charged anyone with for like 50 or 60 years. But it's on the books, so we're going to do it because we can.
I guess the counter argument would be, at a time when they're that desperate that they're not allowing people to invest in alternate things, they'd probably say Bitcoin and exchanges are illegal. That's similar to what they did in China if that was to happen. So that's kind of the counter argument a gold bug would make, I guess. Mm-hmm.
And it's you mentioned a few of the, I guess, the theoretical things, right, about like the EMP and the EMP can knock out Bitcoin and all that stuff. And I've always thought, man, if we have like an EMP kind of situation, we're going to have way bigger problems than, our Bitcoin being gone. The fact that like everything is gone, so technologically, right?
For people at home that don't know, an EMP is an electromagnetic pulse that can take out all electronic devices. And it's something that happens, the sun can actually give off those powerful waves as well. And it actually did happen. I think the last time was like in the 20s or 30s. The sun had a big EMP and it knocked out a lot of the power lines and that. And we haven't really had one, since we live in this modern technological age. Now, I don't know if that's certainly true, if it's likely to happen again, or if devices these days are more protected from that. But it's all pretty interesting.
Got to get yourself a Faraday box to put your ledger in.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if you're the only one with the copy of the whole thing, but it is interesting. Obviously, look, there's all these theoreticals from an EMP hitting and knocking out all the world's electricity and erasing all data and all this stuff. That's the most extreme thing, right? But then on the flip side, you could just as easily bring in but asteroid mining, it's going to happen at some point. It's an inevitability that there will be asteroid mining. It's just a question of when it becomes, profitable to start mining asteroids. When that happens, I think that really changes the game. That's not going to happen in our lifetimes, I don't think, right? Maybe they'll get the first one in our lifetime or something like that. But how slow we've seen space exploration progressing, it seems very unlikely we're going to go out and catch a meteor and, mine it, but we could.
So I guess, the conversation is around new supply, and I think someone did a great piece about the stock to flow ratio and how Bitcoin halving is going to make it more scarce than gold, and so I think Bitcoin does have all that in its favor. I guess what I would say is it would be so expensive to mine gold from an asteroid, just like the cost to do fracking oil is way higher than finding an oil well, and I think seawater has 1 part per million of gold in it, so at some cost eventually you can just extract that from seawater. But all these things are going to come at a super huge price compared to digging the ore out of the ground.
One thing that I found really interesting is almost never mentioned in conversations around gold is actually the really heavy environmental impact that gold mining has on the world. And, this is brought up constantly about Bitcoin. It's a constant attack point for Bitcoin is that, Bitcoin's using so much electricity, right? Bitcoin's bad for the environment. But, obviously a lot of Bitcoin miners, we're about 75% or so renewables at the moment, but not much conversation. I mean, you see the occasional news report from Al Jazeera or something like that, but gold mining is pretty rough, man, because a lot of it's done using diesel, right? A lot of the big trucks, they're using diesel. You have these smelters where we've got mercury and other heavy metals. I did the math. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but the amount of diesel burned every year on average to mine gold is using more power, right, than Bitcoin mining is using currently. And then, of course, we have deforestation. We see there in the Amazon, they're cutting down trees and blasting away the topsoil in order to extract the gold and all this stuff. So what do you think about this? Do you think that there's a real argument there? I mean, obviously, look, gold mining is gold mining. We need it for microchips and stuff like that. But
yeah, I mean, I guess I've never thought about it too much from that perspective because in Australia, where we mine in the middle of the desert, it's not really cutting down trees or anything. But I definitely, agree. At some point, maybe we'll look back in the future 1,000 years and say, wow, they used to dig rocks out of the ground and that was super valuable. Who knows where we go in the future. But other things like silver that are byproducts or rare earth metals that are in the headlines with the US-China trade battle require a lot of chemicals to separate them, from my understanding of that. So it all comes at some sort of cost, I guess, to nature of it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's the old saying: "There's no act of creation without an act of destruction." Right.
Yeah, that's what something I wanted to bring up tonight about how gold is created, and I think it can only come from the elements that form out of a supernova or when two neutron stars collide. So it's actually super interesting about how gold is rare all through the universe, as far as we know from the way it's created.
Which is fascinating. You think about these metals, wow, they're flying around in space, and the gold's so amazing because it never tarnishes, it never gets bad, right? And this is obviously why it's been chosen as a store of value for thousands and thousands of years by society after society after society, because you can take a piece of gold from the Roman Empire and melt it down and make yourself a watch today, and it's the same damn gold that it was all the way back then. Other metals like iron, for example, rusts away.
Yeah.
So it's it's a really amazing metal, gold.
I want to ask you about the security. So a lot of people say that if everything collapses, and some people think it's going to be as bad as some sort of Mad Max scenario, but how do you compare going to the shops to have to buy something with gold or silver versus if someone sees you paying with Bitcoin? Are you just as likely to get robbed on the way home, sort of thing?
It's interesting. It's really, really interesting because obviously paying with gold is very tricky, right? Unless I guess you have gold dust or something like that, and then you have to trust that the guy in front of you has a legitimate scale and all this stuff. But it's cutting gold, right? It's not the easiest thing to do, and it's tricky for that. So I think you'd be much more likely to, I don't know, be attacked or whatever. But let's say you're carrying your Bitcoin in a ledger, right? And if that's the case, well then it's pretty safe, because even if someone does, knock you over the head on your way back from the shop and take your ledger, well, they only have 3 chances to get the passphrase right, and then it resets. So that's pretty secure.
Someone's just asking about the best way to get exposure to gold and silver. So I guess these days, if you've got a shares account set up, there's the ETFs. One of the best and cheapest ways is just buying that boring old bullion, I guess, for people, and they can even store it for you. It's pretty low fees these days, but it just depends. It's a little bit like crypto, where you can go down the rabbit hole and chase stocks and the small miners are like, those altcoins that you're hoping that'll 100x, but they're super risky. So
Yeah,
that's the way I kind of think about it all.
I think one thing too is that look, I guess we're the kind of people you'd be able to prove the authenticity of your gold, or also prove the authenticity of your Bitcoin, because you can look at it and know, because you're in the know, right? I think it's tricky to an extent with gold, because now people don't really have the wherewithal of how to identify what gold is, right?
Yeah.
But I think you'd probably, I'm sure that if gold were to be more popular as a form of money now, you'd have a lot more scamming with people trying to pass off gold imitations and stuff like this, tungsten bricks covered in tiny bits of gold, for example.
Yeah, I think the marriage of the two technologies, so gold-backed tokens, is super interesting, and now we see some silver-backed tokens, and that's another way for people to get exposure but maybe spend their gold in smaller fractions. Do you think that there's something there? I mean, I know personally that down the line somewhere I'll be comfortable to take profits into DAI or take some profits into gold, as you mentioned earlier, as a store of value.
Yeah, absolutely. I've even thought about something like just holding Digix DAO tokens. But I thought, I like Digix. I like Digix DAO. I think it's a really cool project. But I actually thought, well, if I'm gonna take gold, it's kind of the not your keys, not your Bitcoin thing. Well, not your gold, basically, right? And so this third party trust is, I think, tough for those situations. But definitely, yeah, at some point, diversification into different assets, like whether it be DAI or something like that, or actually getting and holding some physical gold. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think Digix have done their audits to date so far. I've been pretty good about that. And I know there's other projects where you can come in and redeem and take physical delivery. But I certainly agree with your point where you don't want to be risking it, that there's nothing on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, this is always the problem with any of these proxy tokens, whether it be Tether or Digix DAO or anything else. You are trusting a third party to have it together, to not get raided by the cops, to not get robbed and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, Digix, I totally believe that they are doing audits. I totally believe they have the gold until they don't, right? Until the mafia finds out where their gold vaults are and raid it and steal all the gold, right? I mean, that can happen.
We've got a question about the gold to silver ratio. So is that something you've looked at before, Lark? Because it's got to extremes lately.
I haven't looked at it very much. Can you tell me a bit about it?
So basically, I think the ratio that comes out of the ground is 12 times as much silver as gold. And a lot of people say that should be the price ratio, but it's a lot more. And recently it got out to nearly 100 to 1. And it sort of ebbs and flows, a little bit like the Litecoin.
Sounds like Litecoin.
Litecoin Bitcoin ratio, exactly. So that was a screaming buy for a lot of people, and silver has played catch up a little bit. And it normally does play catch up like the altcoin Bitcoin relationship. If we are heading into this time where more people are seeking precious metals as a safe haven.
Yeah, I like silver jewelry personally, but I've never actually thought of silver in the same way that I look at gold or perhaps other maybe rarer metals, right? I mean, do you look much into things like platinum or any of that?
So platinum and palladium are far more industrial for the use in cars, for lowering emissions and a lot of other uses that I'm not an expert in these things, but there's actually a big silver community out there, silver stackers, and you can buy the coins, and there's a lot of people who like the silver, I guess, because you get one little coin of gold for $1,400, whereas silver, you kind of feel like you're stacking more and getting your treasure. You can spend it easier if you're actually having to use it in a situation, but I'm sure there's plenty of silver fans watching this show.
It's amazing psychologically to think about how that works. It's just, we see it play out again, right? In the same way that people look at, gold's too expensive, we're going to buy silver instead. I get it. Same reason people don't buy Bitcoin and they buy Litecoin instead.
Exactly. Unit bias. A unit bias, yes.
That's right. That's why people find the micro altcoins like, this is only 1/100th of a penny. I'm going to buy 1 billion of them.
Yeah, and that's why I guess speculation is still the main driver of crypto markets. So have you got any more interesting questions coming in there, Lark? I've got a Mad Max scenario.
Yeah, well, not a Mad Max scenario kind of questions. Guys, feel free to bring your questions into the chat here. I've got one question from Ricardo, and the question is, how much gold, silver, and Bitcoin should one own? But maybe this is more of a question, not quite that question, but maybe for you, like how much, in terms of your portfolio percentage-wise, like, I mean, are you like 50% into gold and 50% into Bitcoin, or like, what's your kind of crypto to metal ratio?
Yeah, so I can't give financial advice or anything, but I think the general rule of thumb as an investor is the older you get, the more you want to protect your wealth if you're planning on retiring. So, I wouldn't be encouraging my dad to go all in on gold or Bitcoin, something like that. So if you're younger and you're happy to take those risks and think it's going to play out over the longer term, maybe you do have a heavier weighting. But yeah, I still think that you can own stocks, and even if the stock market goes down, there's still plenty of companies that do really well. I think having money on the sidelines is always great. If we have a stock market crash, or I actually think that in a bad crash, Bitcoin might go down the same as gold went down in GFC. Everything might go down, and then you get to buy out more on the cheap. So one thing I do see, and you probably see it as well, is a lot of people put all their worth into altcoins and super risky stuff, and maybe they're wishing they had been a bit more sensible into Bitcoin now. So a good mix. Property's expensive at the moment in Australia, but there's having a mortgage and a place to live for a lot of people is still a good investment. So you've got to sort of balance it out with your lifestyle and all those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to be honest, that's one of those things that's always just, it's a very much you kind of question, right? You're the one who needs to answer, well, how much gold should I have? How much Bitcoin should I have? How much should I invest in a property? How many stocks should I have? Like, that's you, man. That depends on what your appetite for risk is. That depends on how much money you actually have to invest, what your situation is. Can you safely store your gold where you live? I mean, not everyone lives in that situation. If you're living in, I don't know, a flat apartment with 3 or 4 other people you kind of know, but not really. Like maybe that's not the best place to be having, 20 grand worth of gold sitting under your bed.
I think the thing I would say is encourage people to get engaged into their own net worth, because a lot of people don't know what super fund they're in. And I know a lot of people lost money in the GFC. They didn't know that they were exposed to all these shares, and there was a lot of property in these portfolios. And in your super, you can choose to have it as a defensive thing or have it as more aggressive, and just be aware of what you're invested into, I guess.
I think one of the real things, and this is money investing right across the board, understand it, know what's going on, because we're not taught about it in school, which is, it feels like a criminal conspiracy. Like, how can we not be taught about money in school? How can we not be taught about investing and, maxims of how to like manage your money and stuff like this? I never got any of that stuff in school, and I don't think almost anyone anywhere does. And that's like criminal in its the way it's rolled out. But you need to actually have these conversations and say, okay, well, what can I do? How can I manage my finances and try to have that long-term picture of, growth and stability and security?
Yeah, I wasn't interested or didn't study any of that at school either. It wasn't until it affected me and the GFC happened that I wanted to learn about it all. And you can learn so much out there these days. But the other thing that I found very interesting was, is it Safe Dean? Almost is he one of the Bitcoin guys who's written that great book? He was a guest on Anthony Pompliano's podcast recently, and he is an economist, and he was talking about how economics these days, people are really questioning the degrees they're getting, because it's all these central bank theories that are actually might not be right these days, and we might be going back to this whole Austrianism versus Keynesianism debate. So that was interesting for me to hear an economist say that we still don't know a lot about economics. It's a bit like saying we don't know how the human brain works in medicine fully yet.
Mm-hmm. It's really crazy when you think about it, that things are taught as definitive truths. But the jury's kind of still out on, is this actually the best thing? Like, it might be the predominant thought at the moment, but look at history. Things have changed. And just, we get to this point and think, well, we're the most onto it generation yet. We have the best ideas, and that's not always the case.
Maybe, well, what do you think? Do you think Bitcoin is going to be around and be the winner long term? Or do you see Bitcoin being, the tech stock that gets disrupted?
I think that Bitcoin will be around for a very long time, assuming that it can actually manage to continue to adapt and grow, right? If Bitcoin at a development level is suppressed and cannot continue to adapt to the changing world, well, then it's going to have a tough time. I made a video today. I haven't released it yet, but I was kind of talking about Palestine and how they're looking at a crypto, doing probably some central bank issue cryptocurrency. But I was thinking, okay, well, let's take this as an example. Like, could Bitcoin actually save Palestine, right? And basically looked at it and I thought, okay, if there's 5 million people in Palestine, if every person did 1 transaction a day, that's 10 times the current capacity of the entire Bitcoin network. Yes. Doesn't work, right?
That's kind of where the conversation stands today. I think Iran announced that they're doing a gold-backed crypto and then Libra. So I think this is all bringing Bitcoin to the forefront, though, because every citizen is being challenged with, well, what is currency and what is money?
Mm-hmm. And if Bitcoin, can maintain its sound money principles, right? Assuming that at no point anyone screws with the emissions or something like that in the future, I think that Bitcoin could definitely stay as the premier cryptocurrency. I don't want to say that's always going to be the cryptocurrency that's number one, though. That's an interesting thing. And that might be very controversial for some to hear, but there is a situation where Bitcoin could be worth insane amounts of money, multi-trillion-dollar market cap, but there might be something that creates more value than that, which we haven't even seen yet. And just if you think about like Ethereum, right? I'm not saying it's going to be Ethereum, but you think about Ethereum and how Ethereum is, and what would be basically, the amazing value to come out of everything built on that entire network. What kind of value would that network have? And would that network that is everything, all media, stocks, bonds, all this stuff, have a greater value than something that is just a store of value or a potentially limited transactional currency?
Yeah, that is the ultimate question, isn't it? What is the bigger industry? The internet and all our devices, or money and finance and all these derivatives these days, and both are huge things that are being disrupted by Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the other platforms that are trying new versions of decentralization.
That's it. It's gonna be so interesting to see how this all plays out. And this is what it all comes back to. I think the crux of our conversation. Well, we'll wrap it up here in a minute, but really this idea that cryptocurrencies, the whole thing is so damn new, just like the internet is really still so damn new. I know we're used to it. You and I have grown up with it. I mean, when did you first get an internet connection?
Yeah, in primary school, terribly, like the worst possible internet you could have down here in Tasmania with the dial-up, and MSN Messenger would just run, and downloading songs on Kazaa and all that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, all that good stuff. And you think about that. I mean, we were kids, right? But that's grand scheme of things, incredibly recent. Obviously, the internet totally revolutionized our lives in the same way that cryptocurrencies have the potential to totally revolutionize finance and a whole range of other things, from properties, stock markets, to medical records, and right on down the list. It can be very, very interesting to see how it all goes. But that's all new. It's all new. Gold has been here for thousands and thousands of years. It's got a lot of history, man. It's got a lot of years of proving itself that cryptocurrencies just don't have yet.
Yeah, and I guess in wrapping it up, I would probably say that is the biggest thing working in gold's favor. That if we have some sort of crisis in the next 12 months, you have to remember that there's big fund managers out there that still don't fully understand Bitcoin, and they're not going to go there yet. They will probably go to gold. But I'm definitely very excited about Bitcoin. But tonight I'm defending gold a little bit.
Well, this is what I always say is I like to have a bit of fun with gold sometimes. Like that story the other day from India where the guys were smuggling gold in their butts. Like that's fun. That's fun. I love that kind of stuff. But the reality is I got a lot of respect for gold investors because those people appreciate sound money. Those people appreciate money that they can hold in their hands and that is not beholden to central banks and all that stuff. Gold's powerful money. I think Bitcoin has more potential though.
It's so interesting to watch those that have jumped sides or now interested in both, and those that are holding firm like the Peter Schiffs. So there's a lot of overlap. But I've enjoyed that conversation tonight, Lark. I hope you guys have it at home. We've dived into a lot of different points. So any final thoughts?
Just to thank everyone for coming out. We got 250 people watching right now. So you guys are totally awesome. Seriously, thank you so much for coming out. I know for a lot of you guys it's like first thing in the morning, but for everyone in Australia, New Zealand, and up in Asia who have come in to join the chat, you guys are awesome. So thank you so much for listening to our chat about gold and Bitcoin. Alex, as always, a really, really great time. So thanks for, reaching out and wanting to have the chat.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. And if people have got more questions or they want to do this again with another topic, then always open to it. So thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.